I paid for my brother's dream wedding, but heard him mocking me as a lonely spinster. So, I canceled the venue and left a voicemail. His fiancée's screams were epic. So there I was, sitting in my Honda Civic outside David's bridal, clutching my phone like it was a lifeline. The whole situation was so messed up I couldn't even process it at first. Let me back up and tell you how I got here, because this story is absolutely wild. I'm 32, single by choice mostly, and I've got my life pretty figured out. Good job in marketing, nice apartment, and yeah, I've got 2 cats, Milo and Whiskers, sue me. My little brother Nick is 28 and has always been the golden child in our family. Mom and Dad think he walks on water, and honestly, I used to think so too. When Nick got engaged to Sarah last year, I was genuinely happy for them. Sarah seemed sweet enough, bubbly, always posting those cute couple photos on Instagram with captions like "my forever person" and all that. They'd been together for 3 years, and Nick was head over heels. The thing is, Nick has never been great with money. Dude's got champagne tastes on a beer budget, you know. So when they started planning their wedding and talking about this dream venue and all these fancy details, I could see the stress written all over his face. We're talking about a guy who still asks me to Venmo him $20 for gas sometimes. Update. You guys, I'm still shaking while writing this. The audacity of some people never ceases to amaze me. Should I have confronted them right then and there, or was I smart to stay quiet and plan my next move? One evening over dinner at Olive Garden, because Nick loves their endless breadsticks, he was going on about how they found this perfect venue but couldn't afford the deposit. Sarah was sitting there looking all disappointed, picking at her salad. That's when I made what I thought was a generous offer. Look, I've been saving up for a while, I told them. Business has been good, and I want you guys to have the wedding you deserve. Let me cover the big stuff. Venue, catering, maybe the dress. Consider it my gift to you both. Nick's face just lit up like a kid on Christmas morning. Sarah started crying happy tears and gave me this huge hug. They kept saying how grateful they were, how they'd never forget this, how I was the best sister ever. For real, I felt like I was doing something really meaningful for my family. Over the next few months, I dropped serious cash on their wedding. We're talking about 15 grand for the venue at this fancy country club, another 8 for the catering, 3 grand for Sarah's dress at this boutique she'd been dreaming about, plus flowers, photography deposits, the works. I put it all on my credit cards and payment plans, figuring I'd pay it off over time. It was worth it to see them so happy. Sarah and I actually got closer during the planning process. We'd go to tastings together, look at decorations, scroll through Pinterest for hours. She'd text me photos of centerpieces asking for my opinion. I started thinking maybe I'd been too quick to judge her before. She really did seem to care about Nick, and she was always thanking me for everything. The pray. Week before the wedding, Sarah asked me to come with her for her final dress fitting. I was actually touched she wanted me there for such an important moment. The bridal shop was this fancy place downtown with white couches and champagne for the families. Very Instagram-worthy. I was sitting in the waiting area, scrolling through my phone and sipping some sparkling cider when I heard familiar voices coming from the fitting room area. The walls were thinner than you'd think, and Sarah and Nick were talking pretty loudly. I still can't believe your sister is paying for all this, Sarah was saying, and she was laughing. Like, doesn't she have anything better to spend her money on? A social life, maybe? My stomach dropped. I put my phone down and listened closer. Dude, I know, right? That was Nick's voice, clear as day. She's like this lonely cat lady who's living vicariously through our wedding. It's honestly kind of sad. Mom was saying the other day how she wishes she'd find someone already. Sarah giggled. This mean little sound I'd never heard from her before. She's probably thinking this is as close as she'll get to having a wedding of her own. Poor thing, throwing money at us like we're some charity case. The funny thing is, she acts like she's so independent and happy being single, but then she goes and does stuff like this. Like, girl, we get it, you're lonely, you don't have to buy us a wedding to feel important. They both cracked up laughing, and I felt like I was going to throw up. These were the people I'd been supporting, the people I thought cared about me. Sarah came out of the fitting room in her gorgeous dress, the one I'd paid for, looking absolutely radiant, and asked me what I thought. I managed to smile and tell her she looked beautiful, but inside I was dying. I made some excuse about needing to get back to work and got out of there as fast as I could. Update, I recorded their conversation on my phone. Thank God I had the presence of mind to hit record. The evidence is crystal clear. Now I'm sitting in my car trying to decide my next move. What would you do in this situation? Go nuclear or try to handle it quietly? Sitting in my car afterward, I just stared at the recording on my phone. Their voices were so clear, their laughter so cruel. I kept replaying it, each time feeling more hurt and angry. These weren't strangers making fun of me. This was my baby brother and the woman he was supposed to marry, the people I'd been bending over backward to help. I thought about all the times I'd supported Nick over the years. When he was in college and needed money for textbooks, I sent it. When he wanted to take Sarah on a fancy vacation for their anniversary but was broke, I helped out. When he was job hunting and needed a suit for interviews, guess who took him shopping? I'd always been there for him, no questions asked. And Sarah, I'd welcomed her into our family with open arms. I'd listened to her vent about work stress, given her advice about dealing with our parents, included her in girls' nights with my friends. I thought we had a real relationship. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about the wedding. This was about respect. They saw me as some pathetic spinster who was so desperate for love that I'd throw money at their happiness. They were using me, plain and simple, and they thought I was too clueless to notice. I drove home in a daze and sat on my couch with Milo purring in my lap. That's when I made my decision. I wasn't going to confront them directly. That would just turn into a big dramatic scene where they'd probably try to gaslight me or make excuses. Instead, I was going to hit them where it hurt, their perfect wedding. I spent the rest of that evening going through all my emails and receipts. I'd been so organized about everything, keeping track of every vendor, every payment, every contract. Most of the deposits I'd paid were refundable if canceled within a certain time frame, and lucky for me, we were still within those windows for most things. The next morning, I started making calls. First was the venue. I explained that there had been a family emergency and we needed to cancel. They were surprisingly understanding and said they could refund 80% of the deposit since it was still a week out. The catering company had a similar policy. The florist was a little trickier, but I managed to get most of that money back too. The dress was non-refundable, but honestly, I didn't care about $3,000 at that point. Sarah could keep her fancy dress. She'd need it if she wanted to have any kind of wedding at all. By the end of the day, I'd canceled or modified pretty much everything I'd paid for. I managed to get back about $12,000 out of the $15,000 I'd spent. Not bad for a day's work. Then came the fun part. I sat down and recorded a voicemail message for both Nick and Sarah. I kept my voice calm and sweet, like butter, wouldn't melt in my mouth. Hey guys, it's me. I just wanted to call and thank you for being so honest about your feelings regarding my involvement in your wedding. I heard your conversation at the bridal shop, and I have to say it was really eye-opening. I had no idea you thought I was such a sad, lonely person who was trying to buy my way into feeling important. Since you clearly don't need or want my help, I've gone ahead and canceled all the arrangements I made. The venue, catering, flowers, all of it. I've got most of my money back, so no worries there. I hope you can figure something else out for Saturday. Best of luck to you both. I sent that message to both of them and then immediately blocked their numbers. I also blocked them on all social media, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, the works. I didn't want to hear their excuses or their anger or their desperate attempts to fix things. Update. The voicemail has been sent and the wedding is officially canceled. My phone has been blowing up with calls from blocked numbers, probably Nick and Sarah freaking out. I'm heading to a spa resort for the weekend to avoid the drama. Did I go too far, or was this exactly the wake-up call they needed? Then I packed a bag, called in sick to work for Friday, and drove 3 hours to this amazing spa resort I'd been wanting to try. I spent the weekend getting massages, sitting by the pool, and reading trashy romance novels. It was honestly the most relaxed I'd felt in months. No wedding stress, no family drama, just me and some serious self-care. When I finally checked my messages on Sunday night, my phone had exploded. 17 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize, probably Nick and Sarah calling from different phones trying to get through. There were also several messages from my parents asking me to call them urgently. I called my mom first, figuring I might as well get the lecture over with. "Honey, what happened?" she asked right away. "Nick called us in tears saying you canceled his wedding. He says there was some kind of misunderstanding." "Mom, there was no misunderstanding," I said calmly. "I have a recording of exactly what they said about me. Would you like to hear it?" I played the recording for both my parents on speakerphone. The silence afterward was deafening. "Oh my God," my dad finally said. "I can't believe Nick would say those things. And Sarah, we welcomed her into this family." Mom was crying. "Honey, I'm so sorry. You didn't deserve that. You've been nothing but generous to them." It felt good to have my parents' support, but it also made me sad that it had come to this. Nick had been their baby, their favorite, and now they were seeing a side of him they'd never noticed before. Apparently, after getting my voicemail, Nick and Sarah had gone into full panic mode. The wedding was supposed to be in 6 days, and suddenly they had no venue, no food, no flowers, nothing. They'd called around desperately trying to find somewhere that could accommodate them on such short notice, but everything was either booked or way out of their price range. Sarah had posted this long, dramatic message on Facebook about how family members can be jealous and vindictive, and how some people can't stand to see others happy. She painted herself as the victim of a cruel sister-in-law who was jealous of her happiness. The post was clearly about me, even though she didn't use my name. But here's the thing about social media. People aren't stupid. Several of our mutual friends reached out to me asking what really happened. When I played them the recording, they were horrified. Word spread pretty quickly, and suddenly, Sarah's victim narrative wasn't holding up so well. My friend Jessica, who knew both Sarah and me, actually commented on Sarah's Facebook post. "Maybe if you hadn't called your sister-in-law a lonely cat lady behind her back, she wouldn't have pulled her financial support. Just a thought." The post got deleted pretty quickly after that. Meanwhile, Nick was calling our parents every day, alternating between begging them to talk to me and blaming me for ruining his life. He never once apologized or acknowledged what he'd said. It was all about how I was being unreasonable and how I should have talked to him first instead of going behind his back. The irony was not lost on me. My parents tried to stay neutral at first, but when Nick started demanding they give him money to pay for a new wedding, they put their foot down. Dad told him he needed to take responsibility for his actions and figure it out himself. The wedding date came and went. I spent that Saturday at a farmer's market with my friend Lauren, buying fresh flowers for my apartment and trying not to think about what might have been happening across town. I did hear through the grapevine that Nick and Sarah had managed to throw together some kind of small ceremony at a community center, with pizza delivery for the reception. Not exactly the fairy tale wedding they'd planned, but honestly, I wasn't thinking about them much anymore. I was too busy figuring out what to do with all the money I'd gotten back. I'd been wanting to expand my consulting business for a while, and suddenly I had $12,000 to invest in marketing, equipment, and maybe even hiring an assistant. It felt like the universe was telling me to bet on myself instead of other people for once. I also booked a trip to Europe that I'd been putting off for years, 2 weeks in Italy, staying in actual nice hotels instead of hostels, eating at restaurants I'd only dreamed about. I figured if I was such a sad, lonely cat lady, I might as well be a well-traveled one. The funny thing is, I started to realize that what Nick and Sarah saw as pathetic, I actually saw as freedom. I could travel whenever I wanted without coordinating with anyone. I could spend my money on things that made me happy instead of splitting everything with a partner. I could make major life decisions without consulting anyone but myself. Don't get me wrong. I wasn't against relationships or marriage, but I was definitely against settling for someone who didn't value me or staying in situations where people took advantage of my generosity. About a month after the wedding that wasn't, I heard from my cousin that Nick and Sarah had broken up. Apparently, the stress of the canceled wedding had brought out the worst in both of them. They'd been fighting constantly, blaming each other for the situation, and Sarah had moved back in with her parents. I felt a tiny bit sorry for Nick, but mostly I felt relieved. If they couldn't handle one crisis together, they probably weren't ready for marriage anyway. I'd actually done them a favor by forcing them to see their relationship clearly. My parents eventually convinced Nick to write me an apology letter. It was pretty half-hearted. Lots of, "I'm sorry you felt hurt," and "I didn't mean it the way it sounded," but it was something. I wrote back a short note saying I appreciated the apology and hoped he'd learned something from the experience. Didn't unblock him on social media, though. Some bridges once burned aren't worth rebuilding. The best part of this whole situation was discovering how many people in my life actually valued and respected me. Friends who'd seemed casual before started inviting me to more things. Coworkers began asking for my advice on projects. My parents made more effort to include me in family decisions. It was like I'd been invisible before, just the reliable sister who showed up with her checkbook when needed. Now people saw me as someone with boundaries, someone who wouldn't be taken advantage of. 6 months later, I was running my own successful consulting firm, had an amazing apartment with a view of the city, and was planning my 3rd international trip of the year. Milo and Whiskers were thriving, by the way. Apparently cats make excellent business partners. I ran into Sarah at a Starbucks one day, and she looked rough, tired, stressed, working some retail job she clearly hated. She saw me and looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. "Hey," she said quietly when I walked past her table. "Hey," I replied, not stopping. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry about what happened. We were wrong." I turned around and looked at her. She seemed genuinely remorseful, but I wasn't interested in relitigating the past. "I hope things work out for you," I said, and I meant it. Not because I forgave her, but because holding on to anger was exhausting, and I had better things to do with my energy. As I walked out with my latte, I realized something important. I hadn't thought about their wedding in weeks. It wasn't this defining moment in my life anymore. It was just something that happened, something that taught me about my own worth and helped me build a better life. The money I'd planned to spend on their wedding had turned into an investment in myself. The energy I'd put into their happiness was now focused on my own goals. The love I'd wasted on people who didn't appreciate it was now being channeled into friendships and family relationships that actually mattered. Sometimes the best thing someone can do for you is show you exactly who they are. Nick and Sarah had done me that favor, even if they hadn't meant to. They'd shown me that I deserved better than being someone's backup plan or ATM, and I'd taken that lesson to heart. These days, when people ask me about being single, I don't feel defensive anymore. I tell them I'm incredibly happy, incredibly busy, and incredibly selective about who gets access to my time and energy. Some people get it and some people don't, but that's their problem, not mine. And if they want to call me a cat lady, well, Milo and Whiskers are excellent company. They never mock me behind my back, and they definitely don't expect me to pay for their weddings. I'd say that's a pretty good deal.